Welcome back to 1023 Culture. Today we're going to be looking at my all-time favorite book series, which is now a TV series. We're going to go through episodes 1 through 3 of The Wheel of Time. I am so excited about this. I watched I watched all 3 episodes twice, took copious notes. This is definitely going to be one of my longer videos. So let's go ahead and get going. Be sure to like and subscribe because I plan on doing stuff like this quite a bit. I'm also planning on doing Cowboy Bebop as I get caught up with the anime. Okay, so I took copious notes. So you'll see me with these things in my hand. These are actual notes. This is something really new for me as a YouTuber. Hopefully, it makes it better, or it just makes it longer. Who knows? So we're doing the Wheel of Time. This is a great representation of the Eternal Snake. We all kind of know this kind of thing. This is something pretty common. Um, and the show opens up with this woman here capturing somebody. And I think that this is Elida. See her, she's all in red. She's part of the Red Aja. Um, so they are actually capturing a male channeler. There is spoilers in this. I hate to break it to you, but that's the only way I know how to do these things. So this is how we open up, and then we see our heroine Moraine from on high looking down, and Lan looks at her and says, are you is he the one? She says no. So they move on to Two Rivers. They use the word Taverin, which is something. It's something that those of us who have read the books will understand. She says there are four Taverin there, and in the books they really only reference the 3 boys as Taverin, but that's okay. So then we move on to a ceremony, which this is Edwin and Nynaeve. I know these pictures are really blurry on here. By the time you expand them out to something this size, it's pretty blurry. But this is a ceremony for Edwin to join the women's circle. Basically, she's all grown up, and it's time for her to join the women's circle and be an adult. It's a pretty dangerous thing. They shove her into a very cold looking stream, fast moving stream of water. And she has to learn how to go with the flow and not fight it. This will become important a little bit later on in a representation of the One Power. So I don't have necessarily, I couldn't find pictures of everything I wanted to in here. Sorry, I did the best I could. Some of the things that I thought was, the changes that they made was this ceremony. The ceremony was not in the book in any way, shape, and or form. The idea of capturing Logain like that was, very at the very beginning, where Elida was capturing Logain. That really wasn't represented in the book, and I think that's Elida, but could be any one of them, based on that. So then we move into the town of Emmonsfield. This is actually an artist rendition of it, but it's a pretty good representation of it, even though it's all pixelated in here. Again, this is what you get when you take something this size, right there, and you blow it up to something like that. So, anyway, you can see the wine spraying in right there. You can see, there's dinner guests happening and things like that. We cut to into the tavern, the town tavern, and the wine spraying in. And Matt, Rand, and Perrin are all sitting there, and it turns out in this, I don't know why, Perrin is married to somebody named Layla, and that's not canon to the book. In a way, I think it does a couple of things. It accounts for Perrin's broodiness in it because of what happens in it, but also it takes out, I think, the whole Fail, or Fail, depending upon how you want to pronounce it. But I believe it was Fail in the Audible book storyline, because that ended up in a huge slog in the books, dealing with her capture and him trying to rescue her. So they make him married. Okay, and I think she's pregnant. He's kind of, he's hugging her from behind and holding her stomach like you would a pregnant woman. Other things that were different from the book to the show was Matt Cawthon's dad is a philanderer, and he's his family is very dysfunctional. In the books, Matt was the dysfunctional one, but everybody else was pretty much normal. His mom is a drunk, and his two sisters are much younger. Okay, um, then we get move on to a scene where Lan and Moraine show up, and I thought it was actually kind of funny. Lan steps in, and they focus on his boots, and then they pan up to Lan, he's an imposing figure, and then Moraine walks in, and I think it's kind of funny because it's like they do it Western style, like a Western. All that was missing was them going through the Batwing doors, and and they were double doors that they went through. I thought it was actually pretty funny. Um, so she comes in. They recognize her as Aes Sedai, which is kind of unusual because they are really out there in the small town attitude with no news of any kind. So how they recognize Aes Sedai, I don't know, but they put it in there. It's in the book. It's not in the book. It's in the show now. So there it is. Then after a little bit, they cut to this is actually going to be a famous scene because Lan and Moraine end up taking a hot bath together in a very large hot tub, essentially. And in Emond's Field, this is not common practice in any way, shape, and or form. But this is more of a Borderlands, or specifically the Shinaran style of bathing, where it was a communal bath. You could end up a stable boy could end up scrubbing the back of a queen in Shannara. So for here it was actually something very strange. What they're doing, but something's happening here. There's a celebration happening. It's called Beltane. When they talk about it, and Beltane is they made it a celebration of the dead, essentially, a remembrance of those who are gone, and then a celebration of their lives. And they do it on an annual basis, and it seems to be a springtime thing. So, okay. So, let me see. Then we move on to the actual attack of the town, and it's attacked by Trollocs. Okay, now I'm going to give you kind of my opinion on Trollocs here. Some people think they did a great job with Trollocs. This is just one example of it. But to me, I don't think they did a very good job with the Trollocs. Personal opinion here. They're all oily, shiny, sweaty. Every one of them. They don't have a lot of distinction from one to another, whereas in the book there was a lot more distinction between them. There was a little bit. There was kind of, the strange, the face shape and everything, but there might have been some boar snout or things like that. The horns changed. Actual height changed. They ranged anywhere from about the height of a man to 7-8 feet tall. So, but the battle does ensue, and they come to attack. But they didn't know about Beltane, so it's kind of a strange attack for them in the book. So, but during the attack, we get to see our first view of the use of the one power. The one power is we saw a little bit of it in the bath where she heated up the water for Lan. But here is we see the true strength and the true power of it as she's fighting for the town, and you can see just the devastation that's happening. So during this, we see Matt Cawthon. We've seen him be a bit of a thief, a little bit scoundrel kind of thing. He is the poor kid in town. The family is very dysfunctional. But during this, Matt really shows his heart for his family. He shows his heart for his sisters in particular. Um, during the battle, Moraine is injured, and in the process of after she's injured, she actually stands back up. She takes a thrown Trolloc blade into the shoulder. But we see her stand up and really get into the power and uses actually the bricks and blocks of the nearby village buildings, in particular the Wine Spring Inn, and completely devastates the Trollocs. And that's it was a pretty good scene. Didn't happen in the book, but it was a pretty good scene. So from here, basically we kind of shortcut. Rand has had his battle with Trollocs at his own town, in his own house with his father Tam. Rand and Tam, Tam gets injured as he does in the book. They took Narg out. So those who were hoping to have Narg there, sorry, they took Narg out. So he brings his father, his injured father, into the town, and they really shortcut the whole thing for Moraine healing Tam of the Trolloc poison. That's not that big of a surprise, to be honest. In the book, using the Audible book, that's about 5 hours in of reading, so it's not that big of a surprise. And then, of course, they take off, and they start traveling. Egwene is with them. She's considered one of the taverns in this case, and in the book it wasn't. But what do you do? It was, they're taking certain liberties. But then we move on to episode 2. So we're gonna drag it through all 3 here. Episode 2 opens up with a White Cloak encampment. Now, White Cloaks are, again, pixelated. Sorry, do the best you can with the images you have. White Cloaks are essentially over-enthusiastic Templars. Okay, if you didn't read it, these are they're there to spread to stomp out darkness and spread light or virtue. So we open up with a White Cloak encampment, and where is he? I think, it's this guy right here. This guy right here is a High Inquisitor. He's an Inquisitor. He's like a Spanish Inquisition kind of guy, and he is and when we first see the White Cloaks, he is sitting in a very luxurious tent, open front tent, watching an Aes Sedai burn at the stake, whom he had actually cut her hands off to keep her from being able to use the one power. And this is just kind of his job, and to him, he's just doing good work here, is because the Aes Sedai are supposed to be evil, or anything that uses the one power is unnatural and evil. As a Christian, I know Christians like that. So the Emmons Fielders have to we just kind of have this scene. This is just kind of an introduction into the White Cloaks here. The Emmons Fielders, they have to run away. And kind of one of the things about it is that they cross water, but the Trollocs have the ability to track you by both scent, sight, smell, everything. So they go to Terran Ferry, and Terran's Ferry, they have a ferryman who pulls them across the deep river, and it's a big one, and they pull across there. And then the Trollocs show up in Terran's Ferry with a fade. Now listen, a fade, they did a great job. Where I think they fell down on the Trollocs, they nailed it with a fade. That thing is terrifying. Okay? So the ferryman takes them across, says, "Hey, I have to get back to my son." But the Trollocs and the Fade are already there, getting and it's too late, and so the ferryman wants to go back across, but Moraine basically cuts loose his fairy and starts a whirlpool in the water that that sucks it down. In the process, the ferryman dives into the water, grabs onto the ferry, and because that's his livelihood. And Egwene. Anyway, she's very, very, very upset by this because essentially she feels like she killed him, and Moraine has to explain to her that if she had let him cross, what would have happened? First off, these guys would have killed him anyway, and then they would have had a way of coming across to continue to chase him, because the Trollocs do not like deep water. Trollocs do not like deep water, and this is deep water. They actually show one falling in. They can't swim. They essentially just sink to the bottom. So then a little bit later, Egwene and Moraine are actually, Egwene gets her first lesson in the One Power, because the reason she's being brought is because she naturally has the ability to wield the One Power. She's gonna find a way to do it one way or the other. She's essentially gonna break out of her system, and it's gonna happen. And if she's guided, she has a much better chance of actually surviving. Whereas if you're not guided, you actually have like about a 1 in 4 chance of surviving. The actual process of learning how to control it a little bit. So now remember, they had that whole ceremony at the beginning. This one. So they had this ceremony at the beginning where she jumped. They pushed her into the water, and she had to, go flow with the water and not fight it and learn how to deal with, which is okay. Now in the book, the One Power is expressed as, yes, a river and not controlling it and going with it. But Moraine kind of puts that into the lesson, and the actual, what they use, what the Aes Sedai typically use for teaching a woman how to start using the power is as a flower opening up. So, but then yes, they do use the water, the river, as an expression of how they control the water, or not controlling it, but going with the flow of it. So, and it just kind of explains the women's circle ceremony there. While they're traveling, Rand's upset with Egwene because she's starting to turn into an Aes Sedai, and so this is a fearful thing for him. Rand has all the boys have a dream about bats. In this case, Rand, we're seeing Rand's dream. He's actually pulling one out of his mouth, and and it's dead. So then there's when he wakes up from the dream, he sees Baalzamon. Baalzamon will be explained later on. A man with a mask with flames in the eyes and the mouth. They'll explain that more in further episodes. But when he gets up and joins the others, he sees all these bats on the ground, and obviously this is something pretty bad happening. Everybody talks about the dreams that they had. This is a little bit of a departure. There was nothing about bats in the book. It was rats with broken backs, and rats with broken backs in the book. There's nothing about bats. And they actually are and in the book they don't trust Moraine, so they're hiding the dreams from her. Okay. Then we actually have this scene here, this is the official scene from this, is where they encounter the White Cloaks in their travels, and this is an opportunity. One thing about Aes Sedai is that they take 3 oaths, and these oaths are bound to them via the One Power, so they cannot break them no matter how hard they try. One of them is you cannot speak a word that is untrue, so not to lie. So in this case, we actually see Moraine taking the truth and phrasing it in a way that makes it sound like something entirely different. So, and we see that scene in here, and she explains how, how the truth, how the truth is you hear may not be the truth that's actually being said. And this is something that Aes Sedai are very, very good at. Also, while they're traveling, this is when we get the opportunity. In the book, we hear about the kingdom of Manetheren. We hear about the kingdom of Manetheren, and in the book, we hear about it before they even leave Emin's Field. This is where Moraine expositions in the book about it, talking about the history of the people and why they are so darn stubborn. But in here, the kids all start singing a song about Manetheren and Emin, and Moraine is like, yes, the old blood sings what strongly here, and they're like, it's just a song. And then she tells them about the history of Manetheren. So that was pretty good. It was a good way of doing it, as opposed to 2 hours of show just for that one story. The Perrin taking a wound during the battle, and his leg wound's getting worse, and he's away from everybody else for a minute, collecting wood, something, who knows what. And wolves approach him, and he's scared, of course, at first. And of course, a pack of wolves approach you in the woods, and if they're hungry enough, you're dead. But the wolves approach him, and I think it's Hopper comes up to him. I wish I would have been able to find a picture of Hopper. Hopper's a very mottled, fur-looking wolf, and they comes up, and he actually licks his wound on his leg. So then, as we go along, we see more Trollocs arrive. Now, mind you, Moraine is not doing very well at this point in time. And the Fade, and actually, this is the scene where this actual picture of the Fade shows up. And Lan says, it's time to go. You need to get to Shadar Logoth. Okay, Shadar Logoth is a town, a city. It's an ancient city. It's abandoned now. But there's a big history behind it being a place that had turned to a lot of evil to fight evil. But it's essentially, it's been abandoned for supposedly thousands of years. This is a scene where they're entering through a hole in the wall, and the wall is like, geez, it's got to be at least 500 feet high, made of these blocks. And you see these facades here for the businesses and stuff. And what I found was it was far more intact in this show than it probably should have been. This is supposed to be thousands of years old. I mean, during the war, during the war at the 3,000 years ago, that's when they did this, and there's several hundred years of this. So this is at least 2,000 years old. Figure this is 2,000-year-old city, and it is way too intact for that. But that's okay. The heck with it. In the book, they describe it as a place with a lot of domes, dome buildings, and there are some domes in this when you do it, but it is, and then at one point in time, Rand is with Edwin, and they go up, and it looks like the building looks like it's the Times Square building, the wedge shaped one. So Matt wanders in the night because he's Matt, and he finds the ruby hilted knife. Now, when I had initially pictured this knife reading the books and doing the audible books, I always had it as the ruby was in the pommel in my head. But they did, I think it was something more accurate. They actually put it in the hilt up by the cross member. I wish I would have gotten a picture of that. Okay. Now, one of the aspects of Shadar Logoth that Shadar Logoth, I think, Shadar Logoth, that everybody, that the reason why you don't want to go there, and the reason the Trollocs won't go there, and this is making it a safe place to hide, to get away from the Trollocs and the Fades, is Mashadar. Mashadar is like the culmination of all the evil and all the sin that happened there, and all the horrible things, and it just grew out of all of that. And now in the book, they called it a fog that was actually floated, in tendrils and big trunks and going through. Whereas in this case, um, they put they made it this black stuff that spread very rapidly and shrank, as well as it basically essentially that's how it moved through the city. They show it getting a horse, and the horse just crumbles and turns to dust. Really looked a horrific death. In the book, the the Fades were able, the Myrddraal were able to drive the Trollocs into the city, but they didn't do that here. Mashadar was plenty enough in there to get to take care of that scene, I think. Now, mind you, Moraine is in pretty severe condition at this point in time. Remember that she took that blade to her shoulder, and so she's unconscious. So when Mashadar starts coming at them, they end up essentially, breaking into small groups. And this is actually true to the book. One of the differences is there's a character that's missing, and we'll get to that in a minute. So you have Perrin and Egwene. Perrin and Egwene, of course, Lan and Moraine, and then Rand and Matt, all three separate groups. How they get out. No, it's crazy because Perrin and Egwene are at the top of this wall. Remember, I told you this wall is like 500 feet tall. And, it's represented as very, very high. And they jump off of it in desperation into water that's there. And so it's pretty crazy. So anyway, so that pretty much the next scene where we end. It's kind of the end of the episode 2 at this point in time. And we're moving on to episode 3. This is when Nynaeve shows up. Nynaeve has been tracking them since they left. She's their village wisdom. She feels responsibility for them. And in the book, she was dealing with the village council and things like that. Whereas here, they just did it. Okay, she just left. So now we're at the biggest screen I have here. This is a picture of Nynaeve at this point in time. Now, mind you, she managed to sneak up on Lan Mandragoran. He is, and he tracked her, and she tracked him, and she snuck up on him. Mind you, he was very concerned about Moraine at the time. Moraine was unconscious, but he was very concerned about that. But she still managed to sneak up on the man. And let's face it, a warder is supposed to be something pretty tough and pretty knowledgeable. So he is actually very impressed with this. However, she tries to threaten him with a Trolloc sword, and he overpowers her very easily, knocks her out. And this scene, she's actually tied up to a tree, which, Nynaeve is not somebody that would do well with being tied, being held down like that. We do see how Nynaeve escaped Emond's Field. In the Trollocs before this, she had been captured by the Trollocs during the battle, dragged off, but she manages to escape. I'll let you watch the show. But while tied up like this, she convinces Lan that she can help Moraine, and she knows herbs. She's a wisdom. She knows how to heal, and Moraine needs help now. So he watches her very closely the entire time as she's goes around collecting some herbs and bark and things like that, mixes up a poultice, and then she takes the wound and she squeezes it, and all kinds of bad stuff's coming out. Lots of infections coming out as she squeezes it out. And the thing is pretty good sized wound. Puts a poultice on it, and it helps Moraine so they can move on. Go away. There we go. Now, mind you, what's happening here is they have 3 separate stories happening here. And when you have these and they're sitting there going back and forth and back and forth, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try to stick to one story, tell it, and then go to the next one and tell it. So it's going to be different than maybe you watched on the show. Okay, so Perrin and Edwin are out on some, they're being chased by wolves in this. It cuts to them. They're being chased by wolves. Now, mind you, we saw what happened with wolves in the, earlier, but these wolves have been chasing them and then pushing them through the woods. They get out onto the plains and the wolves stop chasing them and just start, hang back, and they start keeping up with them. So they're following, but not too closely. Perrin and Egwene, they're doing the best they can, and they run into, they come across the Tinkers, also known as the Tuathon, and the Traveling People. They have 3 different names, but depending on who they are. Now, in this, darn pixelated images, these people are not. They're supposed to be in really super colorful clothing, and their horse-drawn carts, wagons, are supposed to be really brightly colored, and they take that away from it a little bit. And I kind of wish they would have kept the very, very bright colors and the yellows and the greens and the reds and all that, in there for them. I think that would have been really good. But it is what it is. So they get invited into their fire, which is pretty close to what happened. And we see Aram. Aram is a young man who is one of the Tinkers, and he's going to play a vital role later. So we're almost done, people. So now we're going to get into Rand and Matt. Now they've been traveling a little bit, and if you saw Matt's wearing a very thin coat, and Rand has a very nice, nice coat with, sheepskin coat with lots of insulation, so he's nice and warm. Whereas, remember, Matt's a very poor guy, so he doesn't have a lot. Okay, so he has a very thin coat, and he's complaining about being cold, and I think this is just kind of a common thing among them as friends, and Matt just kind of, and Rand just kind of teases him about it a little bit because he's not going to be cold. So as they're walking, they get to a town, and the town is unnamed. Okay, I looked, I didn't see anything that showed, the name of the town at all. But they come across this guy here, and this guy is kind of hard to see in this, but he's hanging in a cage with arrows in him, and it's like, well, that's not a good sign. That's not a good sign. What kind of town are we in here? So they go to the local tavern, or innkeeper, and barkeep, and this is where we finally get to see Tom Maryland. Okay, in the books, Tom Maryland is actually, he was brought in by Emin's Field Council to play as a gleeman in the for the Beltane. He was paid to come in, and then those fireworks were supposed to come in as well, but they didn't mention that at all. In the series, here we are in episode 3, and we finally see Tom Maryland. Okay, now I'm a little bit of a musician, not much of one, not a very good one. Don't expect anything out of that. But that's a guitar. That's a parlor guitar. That's a 6-string guitar. Now there's a whole lot of history involved here. We can talk about that. Our future is their past. That we were a particular age, and they're simply further down the age, and this is after a lot of things happen in the world, and our society is gone kind of concept. But still, a 6-string guitar, parlor guitar, actually surviving? I don't know. So, because in the book, Tom played a harp for when he was telling stories, and he played a flute as well. In this case, we're only seeing, a guitar. And he does one song is all he does. Well, we can only do so much. We are in a series. We have to keep things moving along. Uh, Matt shows his less likable side. There's a possibility that the knife from Shatter Logoth is starting to affect him already. We don't know for certain yet. Um, and Tom, Matt gets his purse lifted, and Tom actually managed to recover it, but doesn't give it back to him. So that was kind of it's a life lesson for you, kid. So expensive life lesson. So yeah, they only have enough. They only have a little bit of money. So Matt losing his money is actually kind of a big deal. Whereas, so in order to have a room, they say, hey, we can do some work, and Dana, the innkeeper, takes him out back and says, well, I mean, if you need a room, we're gonna, if you can't pay for it, you're gonna have to work for it. So come on back here. And she has him splitting wood. Matt says, you made this deal, not me. I'm going to go make my own deal. So leaves Rand to his own hard work, which this is kind of typical Matt thing. So Matt ends up serving tables. That's how he does it. That's what he does. Then afterwards, after he's done working, she eventually lets him stop. He goes back here, and his idea is he's going to rob the dead. He's going to rob this dead man in here, because let's face it, the guy doesn't see if he has any money. He's not going to, he's not going to need it anymore. That's his thinking. Again, Matt showing his less positive side. Tom walks up to him, and Tom Maryland walks up to him, and Tom has recognized his Two Rivers speech patterns and his clothing. Let's face it, he's a gleeman, and that's not a big surprise. So afterwards, we go back over to Rand, and Dana is offering them a really nice room with 2 beds and yada yada yada. While Matt's out there trying to rob the dead man. Dana hits on Rand, but he declines, and she's like, push too hard, huh? So she gets up, heads towards the door, shuts the door, and then says, maybe the braid was a bit too much. I just wanted to look like her. Wait a second. She knows who they are. So turns out she is actually a dark friend. She is somebody who has sold her soul, essentially, and joined the other side. She holds him at his own sword point, and she had locked that door. And mind you, that door was a stout door, and she says it's made out of ironwood. You're never going to get through it. And he does manage to break it down. Foot chase ensues to run through the town. Tom saves them by throwing a knife, and it goes right through Dana's neck and out the front. So pretty good. Pretty good throw. And that's a typical thing of Tom Maryland. Tom Maryland's very good with his knives. So at this point in time now, Matt, Tom, and Rand are all together. And Tom says, well, I'm leaving. I'm leaving. You better leave too. So they're going east. Okay. So, at this point in time, the show's almost over. This is episode 3, and now we move back to Lan and Moraine and Nynaeve. Moraine can't even sit the saddle yet, but she is conscious. She is aware. So that's actually a really good sign. And who do they encounter but Elida? And Elida is the one who had captured Logain. Logain, who is actually starting to go mad already from the one power. And she has in the cage our man Logain. Logain's going to play an important role throughout the entire series, especially towards the end. But for right now, he's going to be gentled, which means he's going to have the power removed from him. And because of that, the idea is once that happens, typically you die. You essentially just kind of wither away. So anyway, that was our show. That was our show. That was our all 3 episodes. From here on out, it shouldn't be anywhere near so long, just because, let's face it, that was a long video for me. Post is going to take forever. So, what did you think about the show? Did you watch it? Did I spoil anything for you? The title says spoiler warnings. Come on, you should have known better if you haven't watched it. Have you read the book? Are you into the books? Did you see the differences? Did the differences bother you? Honestly, I watched all 3 episodes twice, and it didn't bother me in the end. At first, you have these things that are different, but I'm getting into the story that they're telling. The way they're telling it differently than the way Robert Jordan did. I understand the changes, that some changes had to be made, and for the most part, they make sense. And some of them I actually approve of. So, what did you think? So, that being said, be sure to like and subscribe. The channel is 1023 Culture. Uh, this is a lot of fun to do. I plan on doing single episodes from here on out, which will be a little more comprehensive. Hopefully, by the time the series, the first season's over, I'm pretty good at doing it. Anyway, what other shows would you like to see me? Would you like to see done like this? Would you like to see Cowboy Bebop? I'm planning on doing that. Would you like to see other shows that are coming up or movies that are up? I do enjoy it. I love doing movies. So thank you. God bless. Have a great day. And Thanksgiving is right around the corner for us U.S. people. Thanks a lot. God bless. Bye.